I ended up moving to Colorado after high school, and I had a kind of a traumatic event in my life that kind of screwed my mind up for a while. And it was just happened to be that my mom was related to a guy named Randy Weaver that we grew up with in Iowa. Every Sunday we'd have dinner with him and play with my cousins, his kids. And you don't know much about Ruby Ridge. That was a siege up in Idaho where an FBI sniper shot his wife while she's standing on the front porch holding her baby. And the day before, they'd killed her little son, my cousin Sammy, with a 9mm submachine gun with a silencer. They shot him in the back and killed him after they killed his yellow lab. I had a real hard time getting past that. And I started drinking and joined the militia, started a militia out here in Utah, moved from Colorado to Utah.
So, John, one of the craziest things that you've seen at Big Sandy while you were serving your time over there?
Craziest thing I saw was a guy running around the bottom tier, and I came out of my cell on the top tier, and he was getting chased by 7 guys, and they got him tripped up, and they all had blades in their hands, and they just started putting him full of holes. They just sounded like a bunch of chest thumping, and he got up and walked out of the pod. But from my cell, I could look out the windows towards the Unicorn and the cafeteria hallway. And he made it past like 3 windows and just collapsed. And that's where the guard said he dropped dead right there. He was done.
So you actually watched this dude lose his life inside of Big Sandy?
I sure did.
What did that do to you? When you went in your cell at night and they locked you in and you laid down in your bed, what went through your mind?
All the stories that you hear while you first get there about how crazy it is, and somebody, might die every couple of weeks there from getting stabbed. There had been a couple of times I'd seen the blood trails in the hallways and down by the indoor gym. So I knew it was real, but I hadn't actually seen it. And witness it in front of my eyes, man, it's just a matter of seconds. You might never get home and see your kids.
Do you feel like your life was on the line there every day?
I knew it could be. I absolutely knew it could be.
Let's talk a little bit about your life and how you end up in Big Sandy and how much time you get. What was your life like growing up, man?
Man, I had probably one of the best lives of a federal prisoner you ever meet. I actually had dudes tell me, it's like, what the hell are you doing here? And it's like, I went off the deep end. I grew up on a farm in Iowa. We raised a lot of cattle and hogs. We baled hay and grew corn and soybeans. And Dad made us work every day. He started paying us for our work. And by the time we got out of high school, we had enough to pay for our college. So there was no reason to, end up going the other direction, because our lives was set for us by my parents. That's how good it was. I ended up moving to Colorado after high school, and I had a kind of a traumatic event in my life that kind of screwed my mind up for a while. And it was just happened to be that my mom was related to a guy named Randy Weaver that we grew up with in Iowa. Every Sunday we'd have dinner with him and play with my cousins, his kids. And you don't know much about Ruby Ridge. That was a siege up in Idaho where an FBI sniper shot his wife while she's standing on the front porch holding her baby. And the day before, they'd killed her little son, my cousin Sammy, with a 9mm submachine gun with a silencer. They shot him in the back and killed him after they killed his yellow lab. And I had a real hard time getting past that, and I started drinking and joined the militia, started a militia out here in Utah, moved from Colorado to Utah. And my wife and I got into it, and she ended up taking my 4-year-old son and my 1-year-old daughter, and I moved to Las Vegas and ended up in the dope world. And from there, it was all bad news until I ended up going to prison.
Let's talk a little bit about Randy Weaver. He was older than you, right?
Yeah. I would have been 26 when he was 42. So yeah, he was my uncle.
Well, what was Randy like, man? You're eating at his house. What type of guy was he?
Man, he's the best friend or neighbor you could ever have. And he was an infectious person that you couldn't really be around him for more than 5 minutes without just laughing your ass off. He'd bring tears to your eyes. He'd have you laughing so hard. He was a little shit. He wasn't a big guy, but I do know I seen his plaque, and we went and visited him when I was a kid at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He was a Green Beret, and he graduated as the most outstanding soldier of his cycle from the Green Berets right during the Vietnam War. That tells you a lot about him and who he was. But he was just great to be around. He loved his family and took care of them better than anybody. He didn't trust the government. He didn't trust organized religion. He had his own little point of view, but the government wanted him to be a snitch and snitch against a group up at Hayden Lake, Idaho, which if you know anything about that, you'll figure it out. And he refused to snitch against them. So they said, well, you're going to regret not being a snitch against these people. So they set him up on a couple of shotguns. You know, the shotguns that break in half and you put one shell in. They're like $100 at the time. You could buy them at Walmart. But he bought two broken ones from a pawn shop for $30 and fixed them. And then he had a federal informant talk him into sawing the barrel and the stock off a 1/4 inch short of what would be legal. So they were 17 3/4 instead of 18 inches. And then they told him he's going to lose his property because he didn't have a tax stamp to do it. He's going to go to jail for 20 years, 10 years on each one. And he said, screw you. I'm not losing my family's property and my kids. And they ended up making him a fugitive for 18 months. And when the U.S. Marshals decided that they wanted to do what they did, they went up there and shot his kid and his yellow lab. And then the sniper team came in and killed his wife. He never pointed his gun or took a shot at nobody. And that's what they did to him.
Yeah, I read his book, and I actually, during my trial, I was going to use his closing argument about the bird and the young fool. Do you remember that?
Yeah, vaguely.
Yeah, so, I mean, I said I was going to take some of what they use and say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there was a young fool and a wise man. Maybe some people watching the show should listen to this, right? And the young fool said he was going to catch a bird, and he was going to hold the bird in his hands, and he was going to ask the wise man if the bird was alive or dead. And if the wise man said that the bird was dead, he was going to open his hands and let the bird fly away. And he said, hey, look, check this out. If he says that the bird is dead, he's going to let him fly away. But if he's alive, he's going to crush him in his hands. And pretty much he was, that was like, ladies and gentlemen, he is that bird. And his fate today is in your hands. I mean, that was a brilliant, brilliant strategy. And, just what they did to him, did to his wife, man, absolutely outrageous. Did you talk to him after that had happened?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, when they gave him a 13-month sentence, and he pretty much served most of that in county jail, so he never actually went into the feds. By the time his trial was over with, and I went up there for his release and met him, and I mean, it was pretty emotional. He wanted to go buy a necklace and stuff for each one of his daughters, so he was going to fly from Idaho back to Iowa because his daughters, which are my cousins, were living with their grandparents in Iowa. And just walking around the mall, we were getting followed around by U.S. Marshals and feds with guns right on them. They didn't even hide the fact that they were just following us shopping. I'm like, are you kidding me? He did his time. He killed his wife and son. It's like, just, leave him alone for once. And as we were leaving Boise at the Boise airport, some Secret Service agents and a U.S. senator came walking out from behind the escalator that goes up, moving stairs, and it was Senator Larry Craig, and he came up and he said, Mr. Weaver, I just wanted to shake your hand and apologize to you for everything you've been through. He says, I've been trying to get the U.S. attorney to prosecute the people, the man that murdered your wife and the people and the man that murdered your son. And he says, I'm not getting nowhere with that BIT word. That was U.S. attorney at the time was Janet Roon. He says, I don't know how the hell I'm ever going to get through her head that they broke the law and they need prosecuted. And I'm sorry, but I'm not going to give up. And I thought that was pretty crazy to just be walking through the airport and have a senator and Secret Service come out from nowhere because they already knew where he was and where he was going to get on the plane. But yeah, it affected me. I saw him several times after that. I'd flown back to Iowa from Colorado or Utah, and then he came through here one time to do a book signing at a gun show, the Soldier of Fortune convention in Las Vegas. He stopped and stayed at my house, and I ended up getting in trouble a few years after that. And he retired and died, I think 2 years ago in Montana.
Man, I know that had to devastate him losing his son and his wife.
Yeah, he never recovered from it. He didn't.
Sad situation, sad life to have to live, right?
Yeah, yep.
So you end up getting in the dope game, you said, after you leave, and that is what lands you in Big Sandy. Tell us what you're kind of doing, the dope game. What are you doing? Meth? What's going on? Are you?
I'm smoking crack. Hey, I went down to Las Vegas after my separation, and tried the clear pipe and had no idea what it was or what I was even doing. It's like I knew not to try the crap. I always had a hatred for drugs and just knew it was a waste of money. I like saving my money and working hard. I worked as a laborer building block high rises. I've worked on a lot of the hotels and casinos down there in Vegas, going up with concrete block. And the first time that I tried it, I asked what it was and where to get it and how much it is, and I was full blown addict just from trying it one time. And I ended up losing my stuff, sold stuff out of my storage unit, and luckily I had some parents that cared enough about me that they flew me from Vegas back to Des Moines, Iowa, and I went and stayed with them out on the farm and got a job as a bricklayer back in Iowa, and probably made it 4 or 5 weeks, and didn't understand that. Hey, guess what? The addiction don't just go away. Now you got money in your pocket. I was missing my kids for my separation, and I allowed excuses to fuel my addiction, not knowing that my addiction was going to happen regardless of what I did at that time, because I didn't have the tools to overcome it. And when I got back there, I ended up starting my own business. I tried, and this guy told me no, and then he called me back and he says, "Today's your lucky day. The bricklayer I've had for 20 years building my house is just retired." He says, "You want to come do the brick on these houses?" And so I went from making, $800 a week, $1,000 a week to $4,000 or $5,000 a week, just like that, working by myself. I'd build the scaffold, mix the mud, and my dad was retired, but he'd come help me, and I even started having him help me lay brick, and he made more money. There was weeks I was making 10,000 a week doing brick and block back in Iowa.
Let me ask you this though. So now you're making all that money. What leads you to federal prison?
Just my addiction was so bad that once I get them big checks, I'd start missing my son and my daughter out in Utah, and I just could not stand not to be around them. And I think a little bit of the Ruby Ridge thing of never getting any closure about them getting away with murder and nobody went to jail for it, because they've got the ballistics. They know who shot it. They drew diagrams of you murdered my family, and my taxes paid for that. So the combination of my country screwing me and my family, and me not being able to have my kids from my wife, just that particular drug got rid of my psychological problems. I just go out and I spend $2,000 or $3,000 on a weekend, and then go back to work, and then I might spend $5,000 or $6,000 on a 2 or 3 week binge and not come back. And I eventually started shoplifting, and then shoplifting didn't pan out, so I ended up using my tools, and I got a burglary charge for breaking into a store that sells computers and stuff, and then I got on probation for that. That was my first felony. They gave me 5 years for that, a year probation basically. And I got out from that, and by then I'd met a new woman and had 2 little daughters. And when I was getting ready to come home from jail to see her, she says, "You can't come home. I've got a new boyfriend. He moved in." And within 3 days, I robbed my first bank. Just jumped over the counter and took the money out of their doors. They knew who I was. I went in with a bandana over my face and sunglasses and a ski cap. And as I opened the set of doors, there's like a vacuum between the 2 sets of doors, and it pulled my bandana off my face. But I was in such a mode. I just, well, you're not thinking right when you're that high and you've been on drugs for such a long period of time. You're not thinking intelligently to just go get the money and get away with it. You're just thinking to get the money, then half-heartedly want to get away with it.
So at the end of the day, you rob these banks, you end up with a federal prison sentence for robbing banks. How much time do you get?
They gave me 151 months. I think a little over 12 and a half years.
What's that like for you to get 12 and a half years in federal prison?
It just seemed like eternity. Like there's no way I would make it. I had some state charges for the burglary and that, and I had to go do about three and a half years in Iowa. And during that time period, they took me back to federal court, and I ended up just being honest. I just told them what I did, and they were trying to up my guidelines here and there. And they did. They hit me with a career offender, which jumped me from 8 to 10 years to 11 and a half to 15 years. Because they said the burglary at night of a warehouse was violent. And I had another charge of operating the motor vehicle without owner's consent. And they said that was a violent felony. And I fought it in court. Never ended up winning it, even though I should have, in my belief. But rather than getting 8 or 10, I got the 12 and a half years. And I tried talking with a couple guys in the state joint in Iowa before I left for the feds, and they'd been to a camp, so what they told me was irrelevant to where I ended up going.
You end up going to Big Sandy. That's your first prison.
That's my first prison. Yeah.
And what's that like when you do finally get there? Do you hear stories before you get there in Oklahoma or wherever you're at in transit?
Yeah. At the distribution center for the feds down in Oklahoma City, you sit there for a few days, and then you can go up there and ask the guards, like, where am I going? They finally call you up there and like, you're going to USP Big Sandy. So I been kicking it with a couple guys from Wisconsin and I think somebody from Georgia. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to USP Big Sandy. And they're like, oh my God, bro, I don't even want to talk to you. Get away from me. And I'm like, what? What's up with Big Sandy? And I finally met some guy who'd been down for a while, and he goes, bro, he said, that place is full of killers, bro. You need to watch your back there. And I'm like, it's like, man, I mind my own business. I'm not trying to cause no trouble. So it didn't really sink in that I was going to a dangerous place until I actually got there. They put me on a plane and we flew to Atlanta. They put me in a holdover jail south of Atlanta called Lovejoy for a couple of weeks. And then we got on the bus, and it was about a 12-hour ride up to Big Sandy. And as you're pulling in Big Sandy and you see them big towers around it, your mind already tells you you're coming someplace that ain't, you don't want to be. You don't want to be here. I remember getting out of the Sally Port and put in the holding cell, and man, I'm trying to remember how many people are on the bus, but I can't. There's quite a few people on the bus. It's full. And I know half the bus checked in to PC and didn't even make the yard. And they pull you out one by one, and they do interviews with you. They take pictures of your tattoos if you got all that or anything. And then I don't know if it was a captain or the warden's assistant or who it was I talked to, but they look you right in the eye and they say, hey, did you proffer on anybody? Did you snitch? Did you tell on court on anybody? I'm like, hell no, I didn't. And they said, well, are you one of these gangs? You Norteño? Are you this? Are you that? And I'm like, no, I'm not affiliated with no gangs. They said, well, you better not, because if you are, and we let you out of here to go walk that yard, you're going to die. And I said, man, I'm not going to lie about it. They said, well, then keep your head down. Have a good time, Mr. Reynolds. And they just let me walk out of the room. It's like, what are you talking about? If I'm related to one of these gangs, or, if you did tell on somebody in court, it's like, it sounded to me like they were trying to scare you. And it didn't really scare me because I knew I didn't do either one. But then when you get out to your first pod, they take you to orientation unit up on C block. And somebody from like your car from whatever state you're from, they pull you aside and they start telling you, it's like, this is how it is. And then they just look right at you and they say, no, this is how it is here. You don't do this. You're not allowed to be that. I'm like, wow. It's like, if you got to put work in, you got to put work in. If we got somebody that shows up that told you, you got to kick their jaw off. I'm like, I don't know about all that. I'm trying to get home and see my kids. Like, no, you're part of a car now. And I was like, my whole life changed, and it was a learning process. You might not want to be a part of it, but you don't have any choice.
You have no choice. What happens if you refuse? You say, I'm not doing that.
Oh, you'd probably have 2 or 3 guys come in your cell and make you wish you did. And then you'd probably get put in PC and shipped to somewhere else, and you basically you'll have a tag on your name for the rest of your whole prison bid that you're a punk, basically.
So let's talk about this, though. You're in Big Sandy. You were there with Doug, a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
Who else were you there with? I mean, you were with one of the dudes, I think, from the Order. Who were you there with?
Yeah. One of the first persons I met when I got on my regular unit was they called him Big Doug Jones for a reason. He was the coolest guy in the world. Just, he kept order and calmness and respect. Because it's stressful being there, and you've got different gangs that are there, white gangs, and you're part of just your car. There's a little bit of conflict in between them because they don't necessarily think you're on the same level. So Doug was kind of the intermediary between everybody, just to keep a cool head. Kind of feel like I was glad that he was just there. And the other guy, he showed up after I've been there about 6 months, and his name was Randy Dewey. he had a 180-year sentence, and he had 27 years in at Oxford, and they got tired of him writing kites up and reporting violations at that Oxford prison, so they sent him to Big Sandy after 27 years with no shots. And I got to meet and talk with him. He's a college-educated dude, and he believed what he believed in, and actually took the measures to make it happen. He was a racial separatist and wanted to start some states up there to where you got to be white to be in those states, and that's what he believed in. I'm like, how do you feel about it now? And he goes, I've actually probably made better friends with people of color since I've been locked up than I have white guys. He says the white guys always seem to be selfish when it comes down to it. I'm like, well, that's his opinion. You know, that's people in prison, and you're all entitled to your own opinion. But I didn't judge him for his prior beliefs, and he didn't judge me for anything that I had done. And you know, obviously, I told you my story about basically I threw my life away where I can't be there for my kids, and that is embarrassing. You know, you can't pound your chest and say I'm this and I'm that. And it's like, well, you wouldn't be here if you was this and that. So I got along with these guys that were famous and talked to them, and they kind of helped me through my bid to make it a lot easier to understand. It's like just let things pass. Don't get mad. Don't get angry. Don't start fighting immediately, or you might end up dead.
Were you there when any of the riots took place with Bam or any of them guys?
No, I think that was 09, 06 through 09. Do you remember a guy named, I think he was Swift, or it's not Swift, Smitty?
No, but I definitely remember Swift, Scott Reisendorf.
Yeah, Swift. Yeah. Yeah, he was there. And kind of because my background of being related to Randy Weaver and Ruby Ridge, they had the AC, Sax, Arm. Trying to think who else they had there. I can't really remember, so long ago.
They had Arm, Sack, Joe Stevens. You were there with Chad.
Yeah. And as far as like, to me, it was like basically three crews. You had the DC Blacks, you had the Serenos, and then you had the Whites. And they were pretty close to being even in numbers altogether. But the DC Blacks, they ran out of control because they couldn't control their own people. The Serenos were so well disciplined. I don't know if you remember Bobby.
Of course, I remember Bobby.
Black hand Bobby. Yeah, Bobby had a cool head, and he had discipline, and he had those people on lock to act like you're supposed to act to get through this crap, you know. And then because of my relative, I got introduced to and asked to come out and participate at the Grove and meet everybody, you know. And even though I wasn't affiliated, I got to meet them all. And, you know, there's a lot of them that I liked, and some of them were kind of loose cannons. They like to just drink too much and start trouble and shit. But, you know, they either got in trouble and went to the shoe, or got kicked off to another prison yard or whatever. But I do remember being told I needed to come out there to hear this by Doug Jones while I was there. And there had been a dispute over a job in the kitchen. And the one particular job, it allowed you to get the sweeteners, which they used to make their moonshine. And they couldn't figure out how the guy was stealing it. So the prison staff took it away from the white guys and gave it to Sereno. And we're like, no, that's not happening. It's not happening. So the Sereno's like, he said, I'm not doing the job. Says, you got to put another white guy in there. So they put another white guy in there, but they trained him how to get away with it. He was stealing boxes at a time, and they couldn't figure out how he was stealing them. So they ended up firing him too, and then giving it to a Sereno again and saying, no, he's keeping this job. They had a battle about how much that job was worth and how much the pay was. And, you know, I don't know what you remember about Bobby, but Bobby was, in my opinion, fair and, you know, very level-headed. But the meeting out at the yard said, one of these guys, I'm not going to tell you who it was or what group he was with, but they wanted to take him out. And Doug Jones is like, you trying to get every motherfucker here killed. And that's probably what would have happened if somebody touched that man.
You don't know this, and we didn't discuss this, but me and you were there at the same time. You just might not remember me.
Wow. Yeah. I didn't know that.
Ace? Do you remember Ace?
Yep. Yep.
Were you there when
Yeah.
he got shot and killed?
No, I got there right after he got shot. Yep.
So I was the dude fighting with Ace and them on the basketball court when you were there in October 2008.
And I got there in 2010.
You got there in 2010. I thought you were there from 2006 to 9. My fault.
No, that's when the big riots happened and shit. Yeah, you were there in the riots.
You came later on, so we weren't there at the same time.
No.
So, you being in Big Sandy, Randy Weaver being your relative, did they ever send you on a mission? Did you ever have to put in work there?
No, they never did. No. There were so many guys that were volunteering for it if something needed to be taken care of. It was crazy. It's like they could put a notch in their belt if they went and took this guy out that they felt needed to be taken out.
Who do you think was the most vicious dude that you ran into, whether he was white, Mexican, Sereno, black? Who was the most vicious dude that you were at that prison with?
I don't know if it's because of the story I was told or from meeting him, understanding that it was real. I don't know that I would call him vicious. It kind of like gave me admiration. Like if you had to go to war and you're just in a room that's full of concrete and there's no doors to escape. The story I was told that this redhead dude was jumping from table to table with a knife in each hand and just hitting people as fast as he could, and he was laughing while he was doing it. But that I don't want to say his name, out of respect to him. But if you're in war and you know that you probably got a good chance of dying because you're outnumbered, he turned it into something like entertaining for himself and came out on top. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about.
Was he from Tennessee?
I believe so, yeah. Yep.
I know what you're talking about. I was with him in Lee County, too. Had a life sentence, pretty wild dude. Hell of a fighter.
Yeah. It's like I would want to think I could do that in a situation like that, I would try. I'm not saying I would come out on top.
Did you ever have to carry a knife?
Yeah, as soon as I got there, they told me you got to have one. I mean, I never actually carried it, but I had it shoved behind the caulking on my toilet.
So you were ready if you had to be ready.
Yeah. They told you got to have one. If they come in and you can't get one, you're getting beat off the unit.
So we talked earlier about the DC dude. I think it was the DC dude or whatever. The black dude ends up getting killed. You see that. What other things have you experienced while you were inside of that prison, that environment?
God, I remember on I'm trying to remember, it was Wednesday or Thursday was chicken day in the chow hall. And you know how you're already told, don't start no fights in the chow hall, period. That was just a no-no there. And I seen a dude that was built just like Mike Tyson in his prime walk up behind about a 65-year-old gray-haired black man and just snatch his chicken right off his tray and try to walk away. And the old man turned and punched him, and the big dude threw him on the ground and beat the living crap out of him. And as the cops came in, the goon squad came in and got everybody cuffed up. They were walking the old black dude out, and you could tell his nose was broke and his blood's just pouring out of his mouth. But the big dude was the size of Mike Tyson, no crap. He had blood coming out of his mouth and nose too. And the old man was like, I got a good one in on him, and that's all that matters. Did you see that? I got one good one on him. I'm like, wow. He wasn't letting nobody take his chicken. He was like, he got a good lick on that young buck. I thought that was pretty cool.
Do you ever leave Big Sandy, or do you do your whole bid there?
No, I was only there for a little under 2 years. I worked in Unicor, sewing their military fatigues, putting Velcro on them, and kept putting in. I really didn't think I should have been there to begin with. I didn't know why my points were so high, but they said I had an escape from the county jail where they accidentally released me, so that added a lot to my points. I didn't get any shots while I was there. And then finally, I ended up going up to the warden himself and saying, look, this is what my points are supposed to be at. Here's my record. I've already been down for five years, and I want to go to a medium closer to home because I was 800 miles from my parents and my little kids. And the warden looked at me like I was crazy, and he says, "Here, can I have that?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "I'll be in contact with you." And 2 days later, he walked into Unicor and called me out, and he said, "Your counselor's in the They had a little counselor room at Unicor for them to come in and do the interviews." And I went in there, and he said, "So where do you want to go?" And I said, "Well, I heard FCI Pekin's the closest to Des Moines, Iowa. I want to go to FCI Pekin." And then they ended up transferring me there.
What was it like to get on that bus knowing you're leaving Big Sandy? Was it a relief?
It was a huge relief. It was a huge relief. I'll tell you what, as bad as it was still the organization of respect that you're forced to have towards others and they're forced to have towards you. You kind of miss that at some of the mediums because the medium I was at is just, I felt like I couldn't even go back and walk the yard at Big Sandy after just being there. Because I knew guys from my home state, they got 15 years and they were going home after 6. Just getting released for magical reasons.
Any violence over there at Pekin or no?
No. There was some pretty bad fist fights. A couple people got booted, and there was only one stabbing, but it was like a 2-inch knife. It was a little short guy against a great big tall guy, and it wasn't enough to even hurt him. That was over 5.5 years there. I got into a pretty bad fight with a guy that had a sex offender rap on his sheet. He had some guys trying to back him up and say he wasn't this and he wasn't that. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Just, you go do your thing. I don't want to hear it. He practiced his little MMA thing and stuff. I think he was about 34 years old, and I was about 54 years old. And it didn't work out well for me. We fought for about 9 minutes. I took a knee and had my teeth knocked out. I got boot stomped, kicked in the head with them composite toes. 9 minutes is a long time. Well, 9 minutes is a long time to fight on the softball field. I can tell you that much.
Oh, so you got in a fight with this UFC dude and he kind of got the best of you.
Oh, yeah, big time. Yeah. My fighting days were long over before that. When I actually caught this case, I'd wrecked a car at 90 miles an hour in the grove of trees, and I got 3 fractures in my top vertebrae of my neck. I ended up putting 2 titanium plates and 8 screws to hold my head to my neck. And you can barely, if you slap me with your palm on the side of the head, everything goes black. I can't see. So he pretty much just got to toy with me.
Let me ask you this though. I mean, how long you been out now, John?
I got out in 2018, and I did really good for 2 years. And COVID hit, and they shut our job site down. And the government started putting $1,200 a week on my bank card for unemployment. And I picked up a new habit and spent about 6 months using that. And then COVID started to wind down. So I dropped it, dirty UA, and didn't answer a phone call from my federal probation officer. And they sent me back to USB Leavenworth for 6 months.
So how long you been out now, though, since that violation?
About three, little over 3.5 years.
Are you doing any kind? I mean, obviously, I seen what it looks like outside your house. You're in Utah. It looks beautiful out there. Beautiful home. Yeah. What are you doing? Are you working? What's going on in your life now?
Yeah. When I was in Iowa, for them first 2 years, I did everything in my power to get permission to come out here and see my oldest son and daughter. And my federal probation officer said, absolutely not. You're not leaving the state, period, whatever. And it really ate at me. I kind of let that be the reason I relapsed and went back on a violation, even though I shouldn't have. It's not an excuse. It's my mistake. But after I did my 6-month violation and got out, I told him that within about 2 or 3 months, I said, I was joking to him, and he came to do his home check on me at my apartment in Des Moines, Iowa. And he goes, so what's the chances I could, leave next month and go see my son and my daughter out in Utah for Christmas. And he had adamantly, like, there ain't no way in heck until you're off paper are you leaving the state this whole time. And I knew I had buddies that they did worse crap than I did and a lot more time than I did. And they were going to Florida to see their family in Texas. And like, why this guy just won't let me leave? And out of the blue, he's like, yeah, let me know when you want to leave, where you're going to be staying, and how long you want to go for. I'm like, what? I was like, so I made some phone calls with my kids out here and arranged a little bit of housing. And I actually lined up a job. So I came out here to work for 2 weeks for an old buddy of mine, laying brick and building block wall fences. And at the end of the 2 weeks, I called him and said, any way I can stay out there for another 2? And he's like, sure, no problem. So he switched from no chance you're leaving to no problem. You can go ahead and go out there. I don't know if he thought he was setting me up for a trap to reviolate or whatever, but I was done with it at that time. And my first month out here, I met my current wife shortly after I got out here, and he just took my breath away. And I'm like, you know what? All the mistakes and all the stupid stuff's over with. And she gave me all the reason I needed to act right and work hard and, make my money, restart my life. And I ended up putting in, it took me about a month of extensions to get my probation transferred from Iowa to out here. And the federal probation officer out here, he says, if you've got, blood children out here, we can't deny your transfer. And it wasn't what my probation officer back there was saying. He was saying, there's no way we're going to transfer you. And this guy out here pulls up to my, I was living in a motel up in Cedar City, Utah, and he pulls up to my motel and gets out. And I'm like, oh, wow, my eyes are this big. And I go, what's going on? He goes, well, we just come up here to welcome to Utah. You're a Utah resident now. I'm your new probation officer. And I literally had tears coming out of my eyes. I was so happy. I met the woman of my dreams. I got to spend time and work with my son. And I started a business and do a lot of high-end homes. Most of them are between $1 to $3 million homes. We do the stonework on them, fireplaces inside and stone on the outside. And it's not constant work, but it's enough money to pay bills and keep me busy.
Well, you're living your best life now, right?
Sure am. Sure am.
Outside of humanity's hell. I call Big Sandy humanity's hell, man.
It's like, I wouldn't wish that place on anybody, but I'm actually glad that I went there, so gives me empathy for the guys that are still there and have to go through that. It does.
Definitely not the life we want to live. Anything you want to say before we get ready to go, John? Because I definitely appreciate you coming on and sharing your story, your life experiences, the stuff about Randy Weaver. What do you want to say before we go?
Man, I just appreciate you having me on here. I watched quite a few episodes that you've had on Blood on the Razor Wire, and I'm like, man, this guy's so cool. He just lets people lay their stories out there, and it's like some of them are hard to believe unless you've been there. But I believe every single bit of it because somebody's been there is not going to lie about it. You just know better than to do something like that. And if there's something I can do from now until the time that I die, I would. Hopefully my kids or anybody else that watches this, it's like, pay attention to what you do. You think you might be playing a game and skirting on the criminal level. You don't want to end up in a place like that. There's places that you don't see on TV. They're a lot worse than what you really think it is. And you can always make it through. You don't need the drugs. You don't need the alcohol, and you can live your best life. No matter how painful it is of what it is that you're going through, just be a good person and keep yourself straight.
That's it, man. Listen, definitely appreciate you coming on, sharing your story, sharing your experiences. Tell people if you like what we're doing, hit that like button with respect. Blood on the Razor Wire TV. Until tomorrow, we're out.